Dear beloved viewers, welcome back. Before we took a break, I was explaining the first condition on Zakat for agriculture, and we said that Zakat on agriculture is applicable to specific commodities or crops. The second condition is nisab, that the quantity of harvest must be of a certain kilograms. Okay, as per the prophetic hadith, the measure then was khamsa wasaq. So anything below 5 wasaq, it was not zakatable. So what is 5 wasaq in our contemporary time? There are different views among the scholars. There are those who considered the equivalence of 5 wasaq as 612 kilogram. This is one of the view. If I recall very well, it is the view of Ibn Baz, among others. And also there is another view of Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, that he considered 5 wasaq to be equivalent to 652 or 653 kilograms. So when you grow, say, maize or rice, and you harvested enough produce that has reached this quantity or above, then you have met the condition of nisab. But if you grow maize or rice and you harvest something like 300 kilogram or anything lesser than 612 kilogram, then you are not required to pay zakat. So this is the view that is stronger, and that should be followed. But there is also a second view of Imam Abu Hanifa, of which he said there is no nisab. Okay, so whatever you harvested, you have to pay zakat, but this is not the stronger opinion in our view. Nisab for zakat is there, and that it must be either, if you adopt the view of Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, that is 612 kilogram, or if you adopt the view of Imam Yusuf al-Qaradawi, his view is the nisab for agri products is 652.8, which is equivalent to 653. So this is another important condition that needs to be met for zakat in agriculture. The third is the zakat rate. How much? So you have harvested and you managed to harvest, say, 1,000 kilogram, which is already above the nisab. So how much do you give as zakat? There are two major zakat rate that is applicable in agriculture, and the first one is 10% if you depended on rain. So if you are a rain dependent kind of farmer, you grew whatever you grew depending on the seasonal rains that we have, and of which most of our farmers tend to depend upon, then you will pay 10% for those who are engaged in agriculture depending on the rain as the source of water. The other view, the second rate, is if you are using irrigation systems, or you are using people, laborers, to do to irrigate your produce, then the rate here will be 5%. So you'll pay 5% of what you have harvested. This is the rate for irrigation. Somebody will incur extra costs in order to irrigate his farm. There is also another ijtihad on this issue pertaining to those who are using both mechanisms. There is a season that they use rain, there is a season that they use irrigation system or hire laborers to irrigate and so on. So some of the scholars through ijtihad, they came up to say that if you are using both methods, okay, at equal measure or just both methods for simplicity, you will have to pay zakat 7.5% of your harvest. If you are using half of a year, you're using irrigation, then another half of the year you're using rain, then you are required to pay 7.5% of your zakat produce. So this is the rates applicable on agriculture. It is important that when you engage in agriculture, you understand this fiqh zakah on agricultural products, so that you fulfill the condition, the pillar of zakat with respect to this, to your business or to your economic activity. So, leaving that subject aside on zakat rate, there is this question that is coming often with regards to expenses in the agricultural activities. We know that when you are engaging in agriculture, there are some expenses. You have to buy seeds, you have to buy fertilizers, you have to buy, say, pesticides, you have to hire laborers, you have to, some have their own land, others they lease the land from other people in order to engage in the agricultural activities. So in short, there are expenses that are involved in agriculture, as there are expenses which are involved in other businesses. So the question here is, are these expenses deductible or they are not deductible? Should I first deduct the cost of seeds, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of pesticides, among others? Then whatever remains is what I pay zakat or not. So there are two views with respect to this question, and the first one, which is the fatwa of International Islamic Fiqh Academy, it is also the view of a scholar, Ibn Hazm and others. They said that all these expenses are not deductible. You are not supposed to deduct any of these expenditures. So whatever you have harvested, if you have harvested 1,000 kilogram, you have to pay zakat, either the 10% if it is rain-based agriculture or farming, or if it was an irrigation system model of farming, then you will pay the 5%. You don't deduct any of the seed expenses, fertilizer expenses, labor expenses. You don't deduct anything. The other view is of scholar Ibn al-Arabi and others, is that these expenses of seed, fertilizer, pesticides, laborers is deductible except the fees for laborers who are involved in irrigation. If you have hired laborer for irrigation, you have hired, you have incurred expenses for the irrigation system, okay, those expenses will not be deducted. So he is of the view that you can deduct other expenses apart from any expenses related to irrigation. Irrigation expenses, they are not, and his reason is you have already been given a lower rate with respect to zakat rate. You know, the one who is engaged in irrigation model of farming, he's paying 5%, okay, out of the harvest that he gets. So he has already been given a lower rate compared to the other person who is involved in rain-based kind of agriculture. The stronger view here is that of International Islamic Fiqh Academy, Ibn Hazm and other, is not deductible. But Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, with respect to leasing a land, the cost of leasing a land, he is of the view that you can deduct the cost of leasing the land, but you cannot deduct the cost of seeds, the cost of fertilizers, and so on. But he allowed to deduct the cost of leasing a land. And as you know, there are people in some places who have acres of lands, but they are not using it for any productive purposes, though they are in a fertile lands, they are in a good locations and so on. So if you happen to lease that land and you incur cost for leasing that land, then according to Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, that you can deduct the cost of leasing a land. But as I said, the majority of the view, majority of the scholars, especially the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, is of the view that these expenses are not deductible. The other question that might be related to this agribusiness farming is the issue of debts. There are two kinds of farmers. There are farmers who might be having their own financial resources that they invest in. Then there are those that borrow. Okay, they borrow and invest in agriculture. So, are these debts deductible, or they are not deductible before arriving or before paying zakat for agriculture? There are again two views in this. Other issue with respect to agriculture is the debt question. There are two kinds of farmers that are engaged in agricultural activities. Somebody using his own financial resources, and the other depends on others, friends, family members, or borrows from other entities. So the question is, once I have harvested, should I deduct the amount due from these lenders, or I should pay zakat regardless? So there are two scholarly opinions with respect to this. The first one, which is the majority, the one that I recommend, is only debts that has been incurred, only debts that have been incurred for purpose of agriculture that are deductible. Okay, so if you borrowed and you have used that fund for farming, okay, then yes, this debt is deductible before calculating the amount due to pay as zakat. But if you had borrowed for personal uses, okay, then that debt is not deductible. So if you borrowed and the amount you borrowed was directly linked with agriculture, it is deductible. Otherwise, it is not deductible. This is the view of International Islamic Fiqh Academy. The other view said if you borrowed for personal expenditure because you are a farmer and maybe you had no money to support yourself during the time that you were engaged in agricultural activities, then they said you should not deduct any personal loan or personal debt from or in the calculation of zakat for agricultural produce. So the correct position here that we should go with is that if you borrowed for purpose of farming, directly linked with the farming activities, then that debt is deductible before arriving at the right amount to pay for zakat. Otherwise, it is not acceptable. Though, as I said, there is a view of Ibn Qudama that he says any debt of personal or even the debt incurred for farming, they are all deductible. But this is not the view that I would recommend. We should go with the majority of scholars' view, which said only debt incurred for farming activities, not for personal, which are deductible. Dear beloved viewer, we have come to an end of the subject of zakat on agriculture. Until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.